So we're going to start with about 1.5 feet of vegetable tan leather. That's Wicket and Craig in Seattle Brown. We need our pattern, which is 2 pieces. Scissors to cut the pattern. Tape to put the pattern back together. We are going to need some needles. I'm using John James number 002 needles and some thread. This is tiger thread 0.8, and there's a little bit left on that roll. We'll have to get a new roll pretty soon. We need a hammer and a mallet. We're going to need some glue. I'm using a water-based, water-soluble glue that can be cleaned up with water. We'll need a lighter to burn our string when we're done, and we'll have to cut the string off. This is a utilities type knife for cutting the leather, and we need a straight edge. I'm using an 18-inch straight edge. We need some sandpaper for the edges. I've got a piece of 500, piece of 1000, and a piece of 3000. We will use a wood slicker for burnishing the edges, and for our burnishing material, use Tokonole. You can use whatever you want. To go with our hammers, we have 2 hole punches. One is a 3mm and one is a 1.5mm. And then we have a Poundo board that we're going to use when punching the holes to kind of keep the noise down a little bit. And that's all the tools we need. So first, we've got 2 cut lines here. The final pattern will look a little different than this. We're just going to cut right on the yellow line on both pieces of paper. And we are going to line up this piece with that piece. Right now our papers don't match, but we'll fix that later. That piece there. Line this up. There we go. So now A1 and A2 make piece A. So next we're going to cut out A and B and C, and because I want to, I'm just going to use some scissors. We're rough cutting this. We're not cutting on the line yet. So kind of cut out some. These are going to be taped down to our leather. So there's B and C. Cut out A. Might be faster to use the razor blade, but I don't want to make a mistake and then have to reprint my pattern. All right, so there's A. We'll trim this off here. Here's all our scrap, and we're going to very carefully cut apart B and C right in the middle. So there's our 3 pieces. All right, so we're taking our leather here. We want to look at it in the light. This has some fat wrinkles on it, which we like because the wrinkles are going this way, and our notepad holder is going to fold. We want the fold to line up with the wrinkles instead of going across and creating creases that way. It doesn't make a big difference, but it's just personal preference. So we're looking for any bad spots so we can avoid those. This has got a mark right here where they toggle the leather, but it looks okay. So let's take our A piece and we're going to tape it down to the leather on both sides and on the end. What this does, it lets us punch our holes in the leather without having to go through and measure where the holes go. And then we look, there's a little bit of a line right here. I kind of like that. I'm going to put that in B. And if you tape over the holes themselves, that's why I'm using wide tape, is you can use this pattern again without having to cut it out again, because it will keep the holes from tearing out. And it doesn't really matter where C goes, just as long as it's straight. So kind of put C right there. It's got a little bit of a bubble in it, not too bad. And our last piece. So all this is flat, no wrinkles, no flaws underneath that we are worried about, and we are done with the tape. All right, so this is our Poundo board. This is type of rubber. It's about 1/4 inch thick, and this protects our table from damage, and it lets us punch all the way through the leather. And as you can see, little pieces of leather get stuck in there, but it really keeps the noise down. So we are going to take our 3mm punch here is for these 2 holes. All the rest of the holes in red are going to be for a 1.5mm. And this is our maul. It doesn't have to be this heavy of a maul. If you want to zoom in here, we basically just want to set this on the center of each hole and punch straight through. The reason why I use a heavier maul is you got a better chance of going through on the first try without tap, tap, tap. And it definitely keeps it down. I originally did this on a wooden table. Wasn't too happy with the results because it punched a lot of holes in my table. You want these to be as centered as possible, but it's not critical. The reason being, thread goes in and out of each one of these holes, so if you're off by a millimeter or 2, it's not going to matter this way. It is going to matter left and right. You'll see your stitch will go crooked. So when you're punching your holes, make sure you stay as close in line as you can. You might even want to put down a ruler or something as a guide. It's a little bit tougher to see where you got 2 layers of tape. So you might need to make sure you got good light. So that's our first row. It looks pretty good. You can see it's not perfect. I got one there. It's out a little bit. So when I go and put my thread in there, I'll make sure that I straighten up that line a little bit as I pull it tight. But I'm going to punch the rest of these holes, all the red ones around here, the red ones on C, the red ones on B, and then I'll come back. So that's the last of the 1.5mm holes. So if you look at the back, you should see light through it. And if you don't see light, just take a paper clip or something and poke it out. Make sure that's empty all the way. This is the flesh side, not the finish side. So on if this is where our tablet of paper goes, and this is our hinge area, and this folds over, if you wanted to, once you've cut this leather out, you could punch the same holes around here and then punch another piece of this leather right here without the slot cut in it, and then that way the bottom would be double thickness, the top would be double thickness, and it would just be more sturdy. So it depends on how thick your leather is, and do you want it to be really flexible or do you want it to be kind of loose. So we only have 2 3mm holes to punch, and what these are ripstop holes. This keeps the slot for the pad from tearing all the way out to the end. That's a pretty big size hole. This hole only goes on the inside piece. It does not go on the cover. And we want to make sure that we don't punch it. We didn't want it to be too close there, but it has to be big enough for the backing on the pad to go in. Also, a quick pointer about the punches we're using here. There's different kinds of punches. There are punches that are just basically sandpapered down to a point, and if you use thicker leather, the hole gets wider at the top because you're driving a wedge down in it. And then there's also ones similar to this that are machined out, and then these pieces are inserted, and then there's the sharpening edge. So of these three kinds, the smallest one here, these leave the nicest hole, but they tend to be very weak, and these pieces will split on you. These are very strong, but they're hard to drive in, and they want to widen the leather holes so it looks kind of not as nice. And these right here are somewhere in the middle. I really like these, even the 1.5 millimeter, because you've got all this metal taken away here, and it's so much easier to get them in and out. So next we will cut these pieces out. What are you doing? Are you making noise? Here's your sister. There's you. All right, go out and play quietly. Okay. We have two rounded corners here to punch if you want to come in here and look at this. All these other corners are square 90 degree, but you've got a rounded corner here and here. You get a rounded one there and there, and rounded one up there. So there's a total of 6 rounded corners. And there's different ways to do the rounded corners. This is a punch, and it actually has what's pretty close to a radius on that. So what I like to do is actually come back a little ways, a little distance from that, and line the punch up as a test, and just give this a couple light hits to sink it in there. And then see, is that close to what I'm looking at? And that looks pretty good. And you notice these lines they flay out, and that keeps you from accidentally coming in and cutting those. The trick with these is they want to move around on you, in and out, and so you may end up undercutting, or you may end up overcutting and chopping into this piece. There are also punches. Most people are familiar with punches like this, but this is actually a half circle, not a quarter circle. So if I was to cut that, and you look really close, you can see it comes in, and it would actually pierce that thread hole. So don't want to use this type. It doesn't matter. There's really big ones, there's really little ones, but we don't want to use that type at all. So that leaves us with the third option, which is hand cutting. And some people like to hand cut. When you hand cut one of these, what you're going to do is basically come in and make a series of straight cuts and just angle them slightly, and repeatedly make all those little cuts, so that if you make enough of these straight cuts, start in one spot and keep working your way back, that it will it'll be nice and curved. And you can get templates for that. Like this is a curved template here. Here's one that's a little bit closer to the radius that we've got. So if you were to do that, you would come in straight and then turn like this, and then like this. There are metal versions of this. You can also use the little ones inside. Those are quite difficult because you can't use that type of cut. So only on the outside corners can you use those type of cuts. But this is from Craft Tool. That's one that Tandy sells. I see the dogs are still excited. So I haven't decided. Yeah, I guess I'll go ahead and decide. I'm going to use this punch. This is a cheap Chinese punch from Amazon. And I want to line that back corner up right there. And if you notice, you should see a gap here and a gap there. And I want it to just stay, I want this to be perpendicular. And then I'll just tap it a couple times. and I'm all the way through. I can feel it into the rubber mat, and I can pull it out. And there's my corner. So I'm going to hit this one too. And this wasn't in the list of tools because it's not technically necessary. It just makes life a lot easier. So again, we want a little gap here, a little gap there. Want it right on the line there. Keep it perpendicular. And I traditionally used a much smaller mallet before. I used this kind because it was inexpensive. It was about $20, and it takes a lot more force. Using this, you have to hit it harder and swing it harder, whereas a heavyweight mallet like this one, you're basically just dropping it and letting it fall. So even though these are more expensive, this is a Barry King, these are easier to work with in my opinion. So get a nice line there. Let's go ahead and get these two. Right on the line. Gap and a gap. Perpendicular. I can feel it in the rubber mat. Pop it out. And there should be a shiny spot in the center. You want to get that right at the peak. You don't want to be off here a little bit or back a little bit. You want it to be exact. With this particular one, you want it to be exactly on that line. And then just turn it back and forth until you get the same reveal on both sides. There's that one. Two left. So now we're done with the Poundo mat for the rest of this project. Put it away. Now what we're going to do is use our ruler again. I prefer the corkback ruler and metal. Metal because the blade can ride against it easily. Plastic, it'll cut in, but also the cork so it doesn't slide. There are two ways to do this. One is with an X-Acto type knife, or right here. This one right here needs to be sharpened, which is why I'm not using it. You could use a other blade. I say two types of ways, but these are all basically the same thing. These are a stationary cutting knife. So some people, you know, like these head knives. This one's actually, I think it's called a round knife, but they'll put it in and do it. The one I like best is a round knife that has a blade that's in a circle, so it rolls as it goes across. So you can use whatever you're comfortable with. This is a skinning knife for a deer. It has razor blades that are replaceable. This is the only kind of knife that I would not use. And the reason why is this blade bends. And so as you're cutting, as you're putting force in, it can cause the blade to, it can get caught and cut underneath. It can get wavy on you. So whatever type you need, if it's flexible, you want it to be short. If it's steel and heavy and thick, you want it to be super, super sharp. So we're going to stick with this one right now. And they say that the most dangerous knife is a dull knife because you don't respect it and you're not worried about getting cut. And those are the ones that cut you the most. So you see I've got a gap here. I want to come down to where that where this cut line meets the tape. And I'm going to put my blade in there and push this against it. And I'm going to do the same thing at the top here and then press it down and check it. And I'm just going to cut real lightly. I'm going to take a couple passes. And taking care not to tip my blade this way or that way. I want it to be nice and straight. And so see I've got a little bit right there I can clean off. It looks pretty good up there. So we'll do the same thing on this cut. Since I'm right-handed, I always want to put the cut to my right side and want my arm to be able to move straight just like you're using a handsaw. You see how I've got a small piece here, and this wants to roll out. Put another piece of leather the same thickness behind it, and that'll keep your straight edge from falling out. So together is this is the bottom. This piece comes up on top here, like so. This is where the leather backing of the leather pad goes in. Usually it's cardboard. This piece goes on here, and it becomes a bit of a hinge for the folding over. So next, we're going to put our logo on here. Okay, so this is our cheap press. So it's been modified a little bit. Usually these come from Harbor Freight. There'll be a metal ram, a pin that comes in it. So we have cut that pin off, and we've added a few things. So this was a piece of $27 steel. There's actually two pieces of it. It was about this long. So we cut that piece of steel and set it down on top of here with some rubber underneath. And we put that rubber together for a second layer. And then this is a Weaver Leathercraft cutting board. So that goes in the middle. What that gives us is a flat cutting surface with a little bit of cushion here. So what we're going to do is take, this is what's going to be the back side, so this will be our front flap. There's a little bit of rounding there. We have a die with our logo. This is machined out of brass, and the arrow that we scratch on there tells us which way it goes. So if you're looking at the cover, you want the top of the covers that way. So what we do is set that on there, and then we want the distance to be the same, whatever that distance is. It can be a centimeter, it can be, you know, a couple of millimeters, whatever distance you want. If you keep it uniform, it looks better. So let's just double check that. If you do a lot of the same piece, you can make a jig. We have one for coasters, so we can do that. All right, that looks nice right there. So the issue we've got is what is going to push on this since we've cut that pin off on the bottom. Well, we're going to crank this handle and it's going to come down. So before we do that, we want to put a plate that evens the pressure out. So these plates they come with it. There's two of these that come, and this is where it gets a little bit tricky. So we want to scoot the leather back to where it's in the center of this shock right here, or this pump, but we don't want to push it so far back that the leather pulls it over. So step one is get it roughly centered. If we don't get it roughly centered, what it'll do is you'll get one side that's really strong on the impression and one side that's not. So then we gently lay this straight down. That should be balanced. Looks good. Make sure our valve is closed. And we start pumping until the cows come home. You want to make sure we get contact with the front and the back. There we go. Yep. And then we just crank it down. And it's good to test this with different pieces of leather. Different types of leather react differently. They need more pressure, whether it's veg tan or chrome tan. So after you've done it a few times, you'll feel how much pressure leaves a good impression. It takes a lot of testing. So for me, it's right about there. A little bit more. I'm sure I just messed it up. And then we let it off. The springs pull it back up. Close the valve. Leave the handle in there. So we take out this piece. We take off our die. And there is our big logo. This is our little logo for smaller stuff. So this is good just to keep your table from being gross. It's more necessary when dyeing than it is when gluing. So what we're using is a glue pot here that has the brush built into it, and you can adjust it up and down so that the brush, as you have more glue in it, the brush isn't completely soaking, including the handle, in glue. Second, you notice it's not very full, and the reason why it's not very full is because it's glass. So if it falls off your table and breaks and you poured all your glue in here, you just lost all of your glue. So just a safety precaution. Because we have a piece going in here that's cardboard, we don't want the whole back of this thing covered with glue. We only want it covered a certain amount. And so there's all kinds of wing dividers that you can use. So I'd say a little bit more, probably about 7 or 8 millimeters. This is actually a tool from a dentist for measuring something in your mouth. Got it off eBay. So right about there, that's how much glue we want on this. So what we'll do, if you come over here, is we will draw a line where we can see how far in our glue needs to go. And this is just a rough guide. It's not a, timing of an Olympic event accuracy kind of thing. So there's where our glue needs to go on that side of the line. On this one, nothing's going behind it. We can glue that whole thing. So on this one, we want the glue to be up here, and we only want the glue around the edges. So we'll do the same thing here. There we go. And nobody will ever see this once it's sewn. And we're going to freehand it here a little bit. Just kind of move it up there. And then do the same thing here. We don't want to get super far up, because if we get too far up here, the glue will show on there. So we're going to keep it a little bit shorter to right about there. All right. So you can take your knife if you want. I won't do this on camera. But if your leather has a lot of wax in it, you can come here and scrape that wax off, and that gives the glue a better binding. Because this is not a bag or something that's going to get a lot of stress, I don't think it's necessary on a notepad holder. We'll open our glue, and do not clean your tip on your paintbrush on the edge. Clean it on the bottom lip. That way you don't have trouble with there getting glue on the top and it getting difficult to open and close. So you notice this is a white glue. A lot of videos use that orange looking glue that smells really bad. This doesn't smell like anything, and you can clean it up with water. So we will run a little edge here. And we're not pushing it down, we're not dabbing it, we're bringing it across, because we don't want glue in the holes, because we got to run a needle through there. Same thing here. This whole thing could actually be glued down, but for the sake of consistency, we're not going to do that. Get it all the way to the edge, but not over the edge. And this brain of glue, if you're curious, I believe it's called Aquila. If you want to know, just put comments. If we get over this line a little bit, that's okay, because we will be prepared for that. We know it's not going to be perfect. So there's a step we'll take that will mitigate that issue. And last. So even though I've got paper down, I'm not slapping this all over the paper. I'm doing it in the air because I don't want to sit this down into glue. Okay. So we're going to let this glue dry until it's clear and slightly tacky. It's activated by pressure. Okay, so we're about to glue. We notice that it is not tacky at all, which might make you think, oh no, glue's not going to work. But it's, like I said, it's pressure activated. So if you can touch it and you come away with nothing on your hands, you're good to go. So it can be very tricky to line up a piece with glue with another piece with glue, because it wants to stick instantly, and if it's crooked, that's a problem. So I've got something that might help you. If you're doing bags or curved surfaces, 3 or more layers, these locking pins are very handy. because you can stick them through the holes and line up, and then it pushes in on this plunger here, and it gets tighter as it goes down. So you push it all the way down and it'll hold the leather, and then to release it you need to pull this pin up. So hold this still, pull that pin up, and then this slides out. The only downside to these is you can snap the heads off, and they're $5 a piece, which is ridiculous. I know where you can get them for half that price. So here is the poor man's version. These are from Amazon, and these are basically tie tacks. Tie tacks, if you've got a pin, a lapel pin, these are the clamps that go on it. I like the locking pins for holding things together as you're sewing, but if you're just lining up, I like to take these and stick them in a couple key locations that help me line up. So what I'm doing is sticking these through the corners. This piece of leather seed there, and this corner here, and do this other corner here. And while we'll add it, we'll get 4 more, and we'll do that small piece too. 2. And I think I paid maybe $3 for 100 of these, so much less expensive than the locking pins. And these tend to stay in place a little bit if you get some glue in the hole. So a little bit of glue in the hole is not a bad thing always. Okay. So here's our first piece. It did bend a little bit, which is actually going to work in our favor. I'm going to line these 2 holes up here. 1, 2. Probably be better if I had some light. You cannot have too much light in a shop. Alright, so those are lined up, and then I just kind of gently lay it down until I get over here to the other side. Do the same thing. And then you might want to take, before you push that down all the way, make sure that your seam is coming out the other side, and it does line up. So once that's lined up, we'll be ready to push that down. We're just doing it lightly right now. There is a little glue right there, and that will just buff off with our finger. So we've still got these 4 corners. Since this is the corner you're going to see, I would start with these 2 edges first. If you're over or under a little bit, you can hide it up in here better than you can on the edge. Okay, so there's that. Just gently. There's that corner. That's our last corner here. And because these pins are flat on the ground, they'll stay perpendicular, whereas the locking pins can move back and forth. So we want to bring those corners down a little bit. There we go. Now we'll take these pins out. I'm not going to put them back right away because we want these to dry. But that glue should hold it pretty well. And what we're going to do next is use our anvil here and a scrap of leather to set the glue. So we're going to take our small ladies toolbox-ish looking hammer, put it on a flat surface. We're using an anvil here. And we're just going to tap along that glue line very gently, not enough to leave marks in it. And we will probably do this again when we're done, after we're sewing, to straighten our thread lines out. So this is what's left of a very large roll of tiger thread. This was 500 meters. We got maybe 6 meters left. We're going to do saddle stitching. Not going to show you a lot of detail on the stitching just because there are so many videos out there that show you how to do it, and I'm sure I do it wrong anyway. How we're going to measure this is we're going to take all 4 sides first of all. So there's this side, There's that side. Here's the bottom. Here's the top. And we're going to double that length. Oops. Like that. And then we're going to double it one more time. So we're doing 4 times the total length of the stitching. And then we'll give it a couple extra inches. There we go. And I like, because these are braided threads, not twisted, they lay flat. So they have a top and a bottom. So I just cut them at a 45. And we keep most of our 002 needles in here. And you thread these a little differently than you would a normal thread. What we're going to do is put it through the eye, just like normal. No pressure. Here we go. I had it. Oh, yeah. Okay, so we pull it through and see, because it's flat, we don't want to roll it. We want it to be standing up between our 2 fingers, where the wide spot is on here. And then we take this and we push it through the thread like that. Or if it's a little bit off to the edge, we'll try again like that. It's rolling on me. So some people go through it multiple times. Some people pull it tight and then lay it flat like this, so they pierce it. But basically what you want to do is push that up to the top and then pull it across the eye like that. And then you just tighten it like that and just pull it that way. Makes it nice and smooth. That way you don't have a giant knot right there and it doesn't come undone. So you do that to both sides. Not too difficult. The trick is making sure that the needle is the proper size for the hole, which is the proper size for the leather, and that the eye is the proper size for the thread. So we're using 0.8 Ritza Tiger thread, 002 needles, and 1 to 1.5 millimeter holes. 1.5 millimeter is a little bit easier to get 2 needles through at the same time. 1 millimeter looks a little nicer, just because the hole is not quite as large, the finished product. Like that. Some people go through it multiple times. I'm not sewing a bear trap, I'm just sewing a notepad holder. So here's all my threads. So this is for this side. Obviously this would be a little bit shorter, because 4 times that is only, maybe 40 millimeters. Not too bad. And I do not like to start on a high wear area like here or there. I like to start somewhere where it's protected, since this is going to be the center of the notepad and it's going to be hinged right there. It'll be affected the least compared to the corners. So I'm actually going to start in the middle, which is sacrilege, but I don't care. So I'm going to push both needles through and then pull them all the way back, like so. And then I'm going to take the one in the top hole and I'm going to push it through this hole. And this is why it's very difficult to do when you're videoing. That's why I have some assistance here. So that goes through. Make sure you don't pierce the thread. And when you're done and you pull that tight and you measure these, they should still be relatively close to the same. So you can hold this and stitch it, or you can use what's called they're stitching ponies, they're stitching horses. This one is made by Dream Factory. We added some leather to it just to keep it from being too rough, not leaving any marks on the leather, possibly if we overcrank it. And I find it's always easier to stitch towards yourself. So what I'm going to do is put this in the middle, put the threads on either side and pretty close, and then just use this to tighten the hands up like so. And this is going to want to flop around. We'll leave it up there. So one of the nice things I like about the Dream Factory version of this is, unlike the knockoffs, this actually has magnets in there that will hold your needles for you when you're sewing. So if we go in through this hole, and then have this one go through the other hole. They cross if you want to swing over here and look behind it. So the needles cross, and then you pull both of them at the same time with the same tightness. And then you do it again on the next one. Some people wrap one around the other. Everybody's got a different method to do it. Some people leave it very loose. But whichever way you do it, you want to do it consistently with each stitch. Because if you pull from a different angle, it's like you're sitting down for some and you're standing up for some others, got caught down there, your stitch will be crooked. Straighten that back out. Okay. And I usually come in with the bone folder when I'm done and make sure my stitches are nice and straight before I hammer them flat. Hammering them flat will keep you from keep them from wearing out as much. They're not as high. They won't get scratched on as many things. You notice we did not put a groove in here for the thread to sit down in. That's totally up to you. On this pattern, that's not what we're doing. We're trying to do as little work as possible for the people making the pattern, and then they can continue with their own particular style. So now we're going to transition and come this way. I'll do my first stitch, both holes. If I was doing a 1mm hole, it'd be very difficult to get both these through at the same time. Nice stitch like that. Loosen this up. Rotate it to come to me. Tighten it back up. And continue. It's always a good idea to make sure you got something to drink while you're doing this, and that the drink has a lid. Because when your thread's very long at the beginning, it's really easy to knock something off the table. Okay, so we will continue all the way around to here, and then when I do this last piece, I'll come back to the video and show you how we back stitch to keep the thread from coming undone. So we've got the bottom piece sewn, we got the top piece sewn. What we're going to do is we want to, normally we would go through here and come out this hole right there, but we want to take it at an angle so that we come out under that piece of leather. This is what we've done. We've sewn forward and now we're going backwards. So you see how it's coming out under the leather and not under the hole, out of the hole. The reason for that is it gives us a place to cut that and burn it where it's not going to show. And we'll do the same thing here. And if you get it wrong, just pull it out and try again, but not too tough. Okay, so that's both our pieces. We want to pull those tight and take our little thread nippers here. Since this is a corner, we can open it up. And we're going to cut pretty close, leave about 1/16 of an inch. Like that. And we're going to burn these one at a time. Start with our top one. Smooth that in. Start with our bottom one. So what that does is it actually melts the end, and when you smash it, it becomes like a T, and it holds it from pulling back through. So we got 2 things left. 3 technically. You notice we've got to get our edges cleaned up here, so we're going to come in with a blade and a straight edge and cut that again. And we're also, you know, this, if you look at the leather straight on, I don't know if you can see that, it's easier to spot the wiggles in the stitching. So what we're going to do is take this, it's called a bone folder, and we will push the threads in the correct direction they need to go so that they line up. And then once we've got all that done, then we'll hammer it down. Once it's hammered, then we'll cut it and finish our edges. Alright, so we're pushing our edges in here, getting these lined up, and we'll tap. Remember, we want to do it gentle, we don't want to leave a bunch of holes in there. So next we see which side has the most overhang. So the bottom has the most overhang. We're going to cut it from the top. And there's a little bit of overhang on the top here. Most of this is on the bottom. So we will take our blade here. And again, this is why we like cork back rulers. See, there's a little bit overhang out there going this way. Just come in easy. So we got both our sides cut off. A little bit fuzzy right in there. So first thing I'll do is come in on that and just get rid of those little threads. Actually, that one needs to be hit as well. There we go. It's nice and hot. So we're going to come in and hit this with 500 grit sandpaper, then 1000, and then 3000. And then we will burnish it. What that's going to do is just get this nice and smooth. The reason why we're using the 3000 is normally you would come in with one of these edge groovers and you would take the edge off here and you would take the edge off here. But because this is such thin leather, I would prefer the look of just sanding it and rounding it by hand, and then that will make sure that it's nice and smooth so that when we burnish it, it just looks like a clean edge all the way around. And probably around that corner a little bit more too to follow the grain of that. So when we are done, we'll come back and this will all be sanded and we'll start the burnish. Okay. So we've got this sanded with 500 grit all the way around, then 1000 grit, and then 3000. There's still a couple pieces we want to hit, like these little corners here. Usually I'll just come in and take a little bit of that off, some scissors, and then sand that around. Also, if you remember, we had glue inside here around the edges. That's where the bone folder comes in. We can run it around there, and that'll do two things. First, it'll break the glue line all the way up to the thread, and second, it'll stretch the leather out a little bit so that the back sheet of the pad fits in. So I'd like to start in the corner and just pull it towards me instead of pushing, since it has a point on it. Just kind of pull it in there a little bit. There you go. And then same thing over here on the other side. And just a little bit of glue there, you can feel it. And then we want to carefully go around the bottom. And you notice it's actually a little bit puffier now, a little thicker. Not as much here, but in here, just because of doing that. And so we'll kind of clean this up around these corners. So for burnishing, what we're going to use is Japanese Tokonole. Some people burnish with water, and some people burnish with water and saddle soap. For a burnishing material, a lot of people use canvas. Some people just use the wood. It's really a matter of your personal preference and how you want it to look. I like to take it and put dabs. See if I can get it without shaking it. Put dabs every so often on one side. Make sure that's not hanging over the edge there, and just kind of let it soak in a little bit. This for me negates the use or the need of having water first. And you notice this is the finished side, this is the inside. When you are burnishing, this edge right here tends to, if you pull it down at an angle, it'll leave a crease on there. So you got to be really careful with that. I would usually just stick with this one here, but start here to get it all nice and flat, and then move to here where it starts to round your edges for you. That's the profile the leather's going to take, and then this last one will make it smaller. So first though, once we've got this on here, so we want to carefully just do it, smooth it out, and we're going to go on this side to clean that up, and then on this side. We're not trying to slop it on. We just want to loosen that leather up and get all the grain that's been sanded up. We want it to all go the same way. And we'll do the same thing over here and there later. So if you can see the grid in the background, you can still see some little undulations a little bit on there, whatever that was. So now that we've got that on there, we wipe off the excess. We're just going to start here. It just goes back and forth a little bit. Oh, it was that's what it was. It's back and forth a little bit. This will get us nice and flat through there. We don't want to crank it too hard. Don't want to fold this thing in half. So that's gotten rid of most of the bumps. And we're going to go to the second one to round our edges a little bit. And again, just letting the tool do the work, not crunching it. It's not a bench press. And then just check it with your hand a little bit, see how it's doing. So you get some there. I like to take that off, put it back on here a little bit. Sometimes it'll squeeze out. Now, if we remember, we talked about the fact that the leather was not dyed all the way through. When you burnish it, it will pretty much, if it's a darker leather, it'll pretty much negate that issue. Take off the extra here. See, it's starting to push down a little bit, starting to roll that edge over. We got to be careful. Putting a little too much pressure on it. And use this one last. So I'm going to lean it in a little bit to flatten that back side, and then I'll lean it this way a little bit. And then last, I'm going to take this because my thread's still up and down a little bit. Let's do that while it's drying. So I've got a little bit of a bump right in here where it picks up some, but really this is handmade. It's supposed to be perfectly beautiful and perfectly usable, not perfect. And if you want machine made, there's machines that do it. But if you want it by hand and you want it made for you, there it is. So we'll finish this up. We'll burnish this in here, around these two sides, around these three sides, hit it with some leather conditioner, and we'll be done. Okay, so we burnished our edges with our little burnishing thing here. I am going to go ahead and grab, hopefully, a piece of canvas here. Just kind of clean that up a little bit so the purist won't attack me. But you notice, you might be able to see in the reflection, there's a little bit of Tokonole on the surface. Just kind of got there. So we're just lightly going to put some water on here and clean that off. We don't want to go too crazy on it. We don't want to case the leather. We're not going to tool it or anything. We want to get it nice and dry. And you can still see a little bit of Tokonole there on the inside, the threads. That will evaporate, turn clear basically. Here. Sounds like an injured duck. Alright, now the last thing we want to do is keep this leather in good shape. We want it to get a patina. That's one of the reasons why we went with veg tan, but we don't want it to absorb water and get damaged. And you notice when I sprayed that water on there, it soaked in pretty quickly. So we're going to use some Smith's leather balm. That's what we use here. We like it. It smells really nice and it's organic, so it's not going to harm your leather. Only got 3 ingredients in it. So basically you can push really hard and dig some out like this, and then just start working it in a circular motion. It's better to do several light coats than one super thick coat, because super thick coat is hard to spread around and you end up with it getting kind of dog fur stuck in it, and it's not fun. But basically work that in, and then if you want you can come back after a while and buff it with a cloth. Just for the sake of the video, we're going to do the unthinkable and hit it with a piece of paper towel. But if you notice now, water sits on top, doesn't soak right in. And I spent a lot of time here. I didn't spend as much here, and you look what that's happening. It's starting to soak in a little bit. So that'll tell you, give you an idea of how much you need to use. But yep, we love Smith's. So last but not least, we'll condition all of this. Here is the notepad in question for the client. This is a Post-it note brand, so it doesn't have a thick cardboard backing. It's got this thin one, but we made it to where it could accept a thick one. And these are Post-it notes. We've got about just under an inch of adhesive back there, so we made this an inch down. Now the exciting thing is, we've never tested this before we sewed it together. So this may or may not fit. Based on that, it looks pretty good. Can't lie, I'm pretty nervous. See, it's wide enough. There and there. Let me grab my bone folder. There we go. I'm going to have to put that all the way in there, and then I'll have to come back out and condition it. That's okay. It's for the internet. It's for a good cause. If this was hard cardboard, it would be easier. So this will go here. As you can see, we don't have a lot of extra room around it. The reason why, we don't want that to fold and curl up too much. But this will close on top. He can go up to 3/4 of an inch thick, and it'll fit in his pocket like that. So we'll condition it, recheck that, and that'll be done. But that is the 4x6 inch notepad holder. Thanks for watching. Okay, I knew nobody would believe me that I got it in here, so I want to show you how I did it. Basically, I took my bone folder on the back of this little flimsy destroyed notepad, put a piece of tape on it, and then wrapped it around and taped it real hard to the bone folder. Taped it hard in this corner, that corner, left the rest of this kind of alone. So then I took my piece of paper and got it in there, laid it flat, and just start working that all the way to the bottom, and then hold on to the corner and pull that out. So there is our notepad without damage. One more coat of this to get my fingerprints off of it, and we'll be good to go. Now, thanks for watching.